All right, how we doing? Can you believe it? It's another NCMR, another one. We must be getting better media. We must be. It must be possible because we keep believing that it's possible, right? Now, we need to send a message. You did pretty well at saying hello and everything a little bit earlier. But, you know, I don't think you realize that you're saying hello to the entire country. So let's try this again. Grit TV is on Free Speech TV. That's Dish Network, Direct TV. We're also on cable stations all across the country, and it is all made possible, at least a lot of it, thanks to Free Speech TV. Now, Free Speech TV are also making it possible for this event to broadcast in all 50 states right now. So, if you were going to say, let's see, People's Media Now to the entire country, how would it sound? People's Media Now. And yeah, while we're about it, stop the war now. In fact, maybe we should just add one more, just to make sure that everybody can hear. It's hard back there. Everybody can hear. Stop all the wars now. All right. I'm kind of hyped up because I got the great chance to spend some time in Wisconsin over the last few weeks. And thank you, Wisconsin. Thank you, Wisconsin, for becoming a verb. One of the great things that happened in Wisconsin is that we had a Republican governor pick a fight with a place that had really great independent media infrastructure. And thanks to the independent media of Madison, how many of you heard what was happening in that state from independent media before your local media covered it? For those of you watching at home, it's just about everybody. We had WORT. I mean, let me just say, Jim Hightower likes to talk about a movement that moves. And I think when it comes to media movement, the independent media movement, we've had a movement. I feel like I've been part of it for a really long time. I think we're beginning to have a movement that moves in a Jim Hightower kind of way. And how do I know? Well, because Grit TV, although it may seem like an enormous media mega power, is actually a daily program brought to you by 7 people. We have no travel budget, and we have no stringers. We have you. And I mean it, actually. The whole idea of Grit TV is to bring, if the corporate media is about delivering people to the advertisers, people's media is about delivering the people to each other. And I hope that every day on Grit TV we bring you each other. And we do it thanks to the extraordinary independent media makers who are out there in this country. I mean, on this week's program, we had media brought to us by the unions covering April 4th because nobody else did. Brought to us by Davey D, fantastic video on the show today, by the folks at The Uptake, by people all over the country, from the folks at Color Lines. We have community, even if we don't have corporate headquarters. I was able to go to Wisconsin sort of, I won't say on a lark, but at the last minute. In a snowstorm, my girlfriend said, "You can't drive 8 hours alone in a snowstorm?" I said, "You want to bet?" So she came along and fed me snacks. I was able to arrive in Wisconsin and set up for a daily broadcast in the extraordinarily generous heart of WORT radio in Madison. Can we hear it for WORT? And as I think I mentioned, we don't have satellite crews. We certainly don't have satellites. We don't have money. But we have friends, and we were able to broadcast live courtesy of The Uptake, who had their outfit set up there, gathering news that nobody else was gathering and getting it onto the stream and working with Free Speech TV to get up on the satellite. So I want to thank everybody at The Uptake, everybody. When our friends at The Uptake here recount, they get very worried. But they were there in Madison throughout. And what we saw was not just technology really winning the day, but people and their tongues, and they're touching each other with their messages and their stories heart to heart. And they told their stories in people's house, in the center of the rotunda there in the State House of Madison, Wisconsin, the Wisconsin State House that for many, many, many years has been the people's place. People got up and told their stories. And they had a great slogan that I've been trying to think of how to update for the purposes of a media conference, a media and technology conference. And I think I came up with a good slogan adaptation. The slogan in the House was, "Whose house, our house?" And I think, given that we're here about people's technology, that a good slogan for us would be, "Whose mouse, our mouse?" What do you think? I'm not talking about Disney. We've got a little bit of time because our favorite socialist senator is not going to be able to join us tonight. I know. But he is a regular guest on Grit TV. I was so excited to introduce our favorite single-payer supporter, anti-NAFTA opponent, anti-war voter. So you're right. Let's give him a round of applause. Bernie Sanders from Vermont. And let's just remember that he was calling for a moratorium on the licensing of nuclear power plants before the Fukushima disaster in Japan. There are lots of reasons why people come to a media reform conference. I think the number one reason is to see people that look like ourselves and sound like ourselves, because we certainly don't see them on TV. Another reason people come to a media reform conference, in particular this media reform conference, is to find people with what Steve Kroft of 60 Minutes would call wacky worldviews. People like Julian Assange, I'm not making this up. Steve Kroft said, "He is not your average journalist. Some argue he's not really a journalist at all. He's an anti-establishment ideologue with conspiratorial views." You want to know what those views are? Those conspiratorial views include believing that governments suppress information and distrusting the mainstream media for playing along. How many of us have those wacky worldviews? I think another reason people come to conferences like this is maybe we're looking for the polls that clearly other people in the media have seen, but we haven't seen, that show that the majority of the American public oppose collective bargaining for unions and oppose universal health care. Those polls are constantly being quoted, just can't actually find any. So if you find any under your seats or something, in fact, if you find any missing ballots from the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, we could really do with those. So just check around your seats before you leave. The other thing you might find under there is the NBC Corporation's copy of the March 25th edition of the New York Times. I don't know how many of you saw that, but it had on the front cover an article that was pretty hard to ignore. The article said that GE, one of the corporate parents of NBC, had earned $14 billion last year and paid 0 taxes. 0. A lot of other people talked about that story, but somehow NBC never got that issue of the paper. I don't think they've reported on it yet, actually. You might also be looking for the reporters who show up for Tea Party rallies but don't seem to be able to cover anyone else's demonstrations. This last weekend, there were like 3-to-1 reporters to protesters in Washington, D.C. But then when it got to Monday, where there were 1,000 demonstrations across the country, just the one in D.C. had 2,000 people in solidarity with workers everywhere fighting for the rights to unionize and for union collective bargaining rights, and in commemoration of the legacy of Dr. King, whose last stand was with public workers in Memphis. Thousands of people in the streets, but those reporters were just, nowhere. So if you see any of those people, you might want to bring them to a workshop or so. What else? What else would bring you to a conference like this? Well, there's the dancing and the snacks. Don't forget that. There are the great books. I hope you'll buy books outside. I'll keep on signing them if you keep on buying them. And I think that we we will get a lot of serious talk about the possibility of change. I think it is more possible than ever in the media realm. We could never do what we do at Grit TV. We could never have done it 10 years ago. Not a chance. We couldn't be streaming live now to all 50 states 10 years ago. Not a chance. You wouldn't see the speakers you're going to see here tonight as the plenary speakers at this conference even, actually, sadly, but you will tonight. We've made some real change in terms of our sense of who the we is in this we media movement, because that's what this is about. If the other guy's media is about money, ours is really about we the people, and it's about a media that understands that we are only as strong as our weakest link. If that person on the ground in Tahrir Square doesn't dare raise their phone, we don't get the story, and so too in Detroit, in Chicago, all across this country. I'm going to stop, but I want to thank everybody for coming out and helping to make a better media possible, a people's media possible. And if anyone figures out what Glenn Beck is going to transition to, let me know.